I'm Dean. I'm the dad.
I'm Laura. I'm the mom.
And I'm Krysta. I'm the daughter.
And together we are Family Plot. That wasn't bad. That wasn't bad at all. Hi, guys. How are you on this fabulous Wednesday?
Hanging in there.
Besides letting out demonic belches, I'm all right.
That is not helpful.
All right. Well, let's get our that's the word I was looking for. Let's get our housekeeping out of the way. Remember, we have a new Patreon. We will begin loading ad-free versions of regular episodes later this week. And just so the audience knows what a moron I am, I spelled ad, A-D-D, as opposed to A-D.
That's okay. That doesn't make you a moron. It could stand for additional. Add-ons.
Mom, what are you doing?
I don't know.
Trying to make me feel better is what she's trying to do, and I appreciate it.
But I got lost on the path because
She looked like a wizard at that point.
Shouldn't have had to be pulled back from a Harry Potter's pose.
Yeah, she looked like...
We will also be recording our first Patreon episode either later this week or early next week. Also, if you can't afford to do a monthly donation, which is what Patreon is, you can always do a one-time donation through Buy Me a Coffee. And of course, if you can't do money, we understand that. So if you enjoy the show, please share it on social media. If you don't enjoy the show, keep it to yourself. Very nice, very nice.
I got in on that one.
I'm glad you did. So tonight, we set our borrowed Wayback Machine to June 28th.
To get rid of the cardboard box.
No. Okay, listen. I just told you couldn't tell him that it was a cardboard box because it would crush his dreams. I'm not taking his dreams away.
It's not.
What if he actually makes one day?
To resume, we set our borrowed Wayback Machine to June 28th, 1969. Okay, I'm going to try that again because I just started laughing for no reason. So tonight, we set our borrowed Wayback Machine to June 28th, 1969 at Greenwich Village in New York City when a police raid at a gay nightclub dubbed the Stonewall Inn led to days of protests and riots in what became the LGBTQ plus community earliest political statements, and an event that the legacy stretches even to today in this heroic and historic episode of the Family Plot Podcast. But first, Krysta has a corner.
It's not just any corner, it's Krysta's corner.
Well, hey, we have some stuff to talk about today. Before I start my corner, I think it's really weird that we have to make somebody's belief in themselves or like what they recognize in themselves a political issue. Why are we legally worried about what people say they want to do with their life?
Because there's some people that...
They're not even people, they're just idiots.
But there's some people that can only exist if they have people to look down on or to put down. And sometimes it's people of color, sometimes it's people of different sexualities.
Alright, I think it's really stupid that everybody's so worried about what other people are doing with their lives. Like, wow, you're worried about someone who likes a different gender than you? Okay. Wow, great one, buddy. Okay, chat, chill. Okay? You'll be alright.
Is Chad like Karen? Did I miss that meeting?
It's one of the many names.
Because I hear Kyle, and I don't like Kyle, because there's a comedian named Kyle Kinane that I like a lot, and he's definitely like an anti-Karen, or Kyle, or whatever.
It's not Kyle.
See, Kyle to me is always the Kyle like in She-Ra, where
I love Kyle. I love Kyle.
He was like the sad little assistant that everybody felt bad for and just kind of adored. Like, you're so cute.
You're so cute, Kyle. I love Kyle. But yeah, no, there's multiple names for male Karens. A lot of people just call them male Karens. But hey, what can I say about that, you know? But yeah, it disgusts me that people are just like, oh yeah, that person's living their life and being happy. F that, man. F that. How dare they be happy? This is stupid.
Again, Krysta, some people are only happy when they're holding down someone else.
Let's hold them down. See how they feel about it.
They feel like they're already being held down. That's why they're reduced to such ridiculous shenanigans.
People are so weird.
People are definitely weird.
Anyways, I actually started on something this week. I got foam, and therefore now I'm making a fursuit head.
I saw the beginnings of that this morning. It looks really good.
So far, yeah. It's a Doberman.
Wouldn't it be a Dober woman?
No. My Doberman character is a male.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, furries, just to step a little bit out of the lane that I was in. Furries can have characters that are not the same gender as them, just because it's a self-representation, I guess, of what you want to look like if you were an animal.
I see.
It doesn't mean it has to be the same gender. You know?
Yeah.
And not all characters that furries make are personas. Personas are their main character. So, if you were just talking about a character, a furry would say, I made a character, not a persona. Big brain.
Very big brain.
Yeah.
And I knew that furries could, like, have characters that didn't match their external sexuality, just because I've met a few guys that are female furries or women who are male furries, and so yeah.
Right. And I have a couple characters myself that aren't my gender. I have a male persona, and I also have non-binary personas and stuff like that.
Well, all of your characters that Dad makes in his video games, a lot of them are, you have males and females for, different strengths and different reasons, and you're playing all of those in an RPG, which is similar.
Right.
A lot of that, though, I started because I wanted to get a sense for how it feels to be female online, and now I just do it out of a weird sense of comfort.
And I get it. Like, especially in a roleplay scenario, the roleplay character and being able to embrace playing a character of another gender you know, there's an extra thought process that goes into it that you can kind of get into when you're playing a character. That same thing.
Right.
I want people to understand that being a furry isn't like somebody seeing themselves as an animal. It's somebody dressing up as a character. Not like one from a cartoon, but the character that they made. It's basically like cosplaying, just their own character. And it happens to be an anthropomorphic animal. Therefore, not being called cosplayers, but being called furries. Now, the people who dress up as their own characters can identify as a cosplayer if they want to. And just because you have an anthropomorphic character, let's say Dimmix had a anthropomorphic solid skunk character. He doesn't have to be a furry if he doesn't want to, but he has that anthropomorphic animal character. It's basically like making your own cosplay of the character that you already have, but it's an animal.
Right.
So, yeah, that's my explanation of the part of the furry community that I am in. Now, there are otherkin Ethereans, but I do not identify as an otherkin. I do identify as Etherean.
And now there's also plushies, right?
Yeah, there's plushies. Furries do all sorts of things. The fursuiting part is just one small group. It's a totally different thing. See, a lot of furries don't have fursuits. The reason why so many young furries have fursuits now are because they've found cheap alternatives. Dino masks.
Gotcha.
It's the creativity that goes into the fandom. It's not... Most of the time, if a furry has a fursuit, that's cool, but, like, it's the creativity that goes into it, not just the fursona.
Right. It was once explained to me, and I hope I don't get this wrong, but, like, a furry is usually based on either a real animal, whereas a plushie is more based on, like, a stuffed animal. Like, you can be a furry bear or a plushie bear.
Yeah, and there are some plushie fursuits. There are people who have cosplayed or had a fursuit of, like, those little stuffed bears, the TY bears.
Right.
There's furries who have done that as well. So, yeah, there's plushies, and then there's furries. You could be one or you could be the other. It's all about if you want to join the community, which you don't have to have dino masks or a fursuit. You cannot be a furry and still have that stuff. No.
Cool. So what else is up in Krysta's corner?
Yeah, that's pretty much what's in my head. You got me silent for the next few minutes before I do, and then I do my part, and then I won't be silent.
Okay.
I just want some chicken nuggets.
I had to give you your claps because we're exiting your segment. Okay, before we get too deep into the Stonewall Riots, we're going to have to cover some history. Now, understand what little history we are discussing here is a very brief history, and there's a lot missing from it. We're only covering the bare minimum we need so that we have some context for the Stonewall Riots. There are plenty of places you can go to get more info on the history of gays and trans here in America, much less around the world.
Okay, before we get too into anything, I just want to give a huge shout out to you because I don't think that you've said anything about it in the notes, but I know that this meant a lot to you for you to support our children who identify, and everyone that we know who have children who identify. And I just want to give a shout out to you that this meant a lot to you, and you worked really hard on this research, and I'm really proud of you for doing that.
Thank you.
You did a lot of good.
They say that people who forget their history are doomed to repeat it, and I don't want to see the LGBTQ plus community have to repeat any of their history they've fought damn hard, as we'll talk about today.
Yeah, right.
So let's do a brief history of being gay in America. We're a country founded initially by Puritans and Christians, and because of this, life centered around the heterocentric concept of marriage and family. Being gay was criminalized. Documented executions for sodomy, which is what they called being gay if you were a man at the time, began in 1624 with the execution of Richard Cornish. Lesbian executions happened as well, beginning with Sarah White Norman and Mary Vincent Hammond in 1649. Sodomy laws were enacted pretty much nationwide and were not removed until around 1925, meaning up until this point you could be arrested, imprisoned, housed at an insane asylum, and even executed merely for being gay. And that's in this country. That's in America, the land of the free.
Yeah. It's really not being so free anymore. Like, they're starting to close off what the gays can and can't do.
And you're right. I don't want to take anything away from what you just said. You're absolutely right, which is why I kind of felt it was important that we cover this.
Yeah.
Now, gays began to be referenced or even appear in films and books after 1925. But even as they began to see themselves included in popular culture, they still fought for their freedom. In 1926, for example, Eva Kochever, who had run the popular Eve's Hangout in New York City's Greenwich Village, a lesbian-centric cafe, and the descriptions I've seen of it, I describe it as a place where men are allowed but not welcomed.
I would definitely join. Hello, ladies.
But it was raided by the NYPD. Eva was arrested, tried and convicted under obscenity laws, and deported to her native Poland. In the 1960s, liberation philosophy had begun to permeate the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, the feminist movement, and the anti-war movement. And it was beginning to influence the gay rights movement as well. The 60s is when we begin to see leaflets and pamphlets coming out basically saying, you know, and even some books about being gay and how it's okay. It wasn't a big movement, but it was starting.
Right.
No longer content to be an invisible embarrassment, gay men and women began to organize and demand to be seen, respected, and treated better. Things slowly, at that point, began to change for the better.
And that's the part where I'm just like, it seems like we have gone back in time a little bit. Right. Seems like it is replaying.
Oh, definitely.
Sure. So, now we set the scene in Greenwich Village. Greenwich, right?
Greenwich.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. It looks like Greenwich, but it's...
Gay bars in New York City traditionally could not get liquor license as places where gay men and women loitered were traditionally not allowed to serve alcohol. The only way they were allowed to exist at all was to pay bribes to both the cops and the mobs. The election of Mayor John Lindsay in 1965 signaled a major shift in city politics, and a new attitude towards sexual mores began changing the social atmosphere of New York. On April 21st, 1966, Dick
Leach.
I'm sorry if I'm saying the name wrong. President of the New York Manhattan Society.
It's not Manhattan, it's Mattachine.
Mattachine. Oh, I'm so sorry. New York Mattachine Society. What is that?
It was a very early gay rights movement for gay men.
Okay. All right. Wow. I wasn't familiar with Mattachine. So, interesting. Okay. Not a word I've ever heard before. I apologize. I love when I learn new things like that.
Dick Leitch, president of the New York Mattachine Society. If you've lost your...
I had, and I'm sorry.
It's fine. For some reason, turning it blue makes it hard to follow. I need to find a new...
It's okay.
A new color.
And two other members staged the sit-in at the Julius Bar on West 10th Street in Greenwich Village. This resulted in the anti-gay accommodation rules of the New York State Liquor Authority being overturned in subsequent court actions. These SLA provisions declared that it was illegal for homosexuals to congregate and be served alcoholic beverages in bars. While those laws had recently changed, still, many gay hangouts were technically illegal due to these old laws. Greenwich Village had become a hangout and a haven for gay men and women, for it was a neighborhood which had hosted bathhouses in the 20s and gay clubs to this day. Still, even though some changes have begun, many on the police force and elsewhere continued to legislate and legislate against and attack the gay community. But in the 1960s, gay men and women were beginning to get angry about being treated as second-class citizens.
So
I'm sorry, I kind of stumbled over that. It's upsetting, though.
It's okay. That's a lot of heavy stuff, and I didn't organize it well. I was noticing that the way as you read it. But before we go on, let's take a moment for a word from our sponsors.
I feel sponsored.
Yay! Krysta feels sponsored.
Mom?
I feel sponsored.
Yay! Everyone feels sponsored.
Oh, that was a long pause. Okay.
Well, I just thought you were taking over the sponsors
No.
this week. So I was
Listen, I just did it to cut the silence because it was too long.
okay. I'm so sorry.
The silence was too long.
Anyways, eternal time.
You can tell Krysta's a Bose. We don't like silence for very long at all.
Oh no! If you're silent around me, I'm going to make a noise. I will most likely do a.
Ooh! Don't do that noise.
I would most likely do that, or just make a other random noise. I don't know what. Anyways, often known as simply Stonewall. The Stonewall Inn was located at 51 and 53 Christopher Street, as it had been a restaurant and a nightclub for the gay community before 3 members of
The Genovese, yes.
of the Genovese crime family purchased it for $3,500 in 1966. How much would that be in 1966?
I don't know. In 1966, even in 1966, that still doesn't seem like very much.
Yeah.
If I had to guess, I would say that's maybe around 20,000 today. I don't know for sure, but that would be my guess.
He must have not had much.
So yeah, I mean that for a business or a plot of land or anything, that doesn't seem like a lot of money at all.
Well, no, but because it had been a gay restaurant and a gay nightclub, it wasn't. It's not like it was valued property.
No, I get that. I'm just saying, I don't. Maybe I don't have a good basis on how much property is worth.
And that's possible. Lord knows I've never owned anything bigger than a car in my life. Certainly not a home. So.
Same.
Anyways, they sold it for $3,500.
Yep.
In 1966 to turn it into a gay bar. Now it should be noted that while the Mafia ran the bar, they did it because they felt a bar that catered to a segment of the population that was otherwise treated poorly or otherwise poorly served could make them money. So they did it because they wanted to make money out of gays, which is what a couple of businesses on their own do today as well. Mm-hmm. So they did it for the money. They treated the clubs and bars at the time.
You skipped a line. They treated the customers as
They treated the customers poorly, overcharged for drinks that they watered down, and like most gay community, oh my gosh. Like most gay clubs and bars at this time, it was neither owned nor run by anyone in the LGBTQ plus community. Which, that sucks. If you're gonna have a gay bar, why not have people of that community work there? Once a week, a police officer would collect envelopes of cash as payoff, known as gala. This is a portmanteau of the words gay and payola. Which, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
As the Stonewall Inn had no liquor license, it had no running water behind the bar. Dirty glasses were run through tubs of water and immediately reused, which...
Yeah, right? Oh, gross. Okay, stop.
That's nasty. There were no fire exits, and the toilet overran consistently. Ew.
Krysta sounded like Plucky.
Though the bar was not used for prostitution, drug sales, and other black market activities took place. It was the only bar for gay men in New York. In New York City, where dancing was allowed. Dancing was its main draw since reopening as a gay club. In 1969, why did I say it like that? No, one would knock on the door, and the doorman would look through through the peephole. If the doorman knew the person, or they looked gay, they would be allowed in. This was done to keep out the keep out undercover police. In the slang of the times, referred to as Alice Bluegown, Betty Badge, or Lily Law. Inside it was painted black, so it was very dark. There were 2 dance floors lit by gel lights or black lights. If police entered, regular white lights were flashed to let the patrons know to stop dancing. Dancing and touching?
Men were not allowed to dance touching. It was against the law. So if the police broke in, they would flash the lights, and the men knew to step apart. Mob's not great at running gay bars, but they do know a few things about breaking the law.
The bar had a room for queens. Now this is all work out wrong. Effeminate?
Effeminate? Yes.
Effeminate men who wore makeup and teased their hair but wore men's clothing. And a few men in drag and lesbians were allowed in as well. Younger homeless adolescent males would often attempt to get in the bar in hopes the patrons would buy them drinks. The age of the clientele ranged from the upper teens to early 30s. Most patrons were white, with a handful of blacks and Hispanics as well. Because of its location and the attraction of dancing, many thought of it as the gay bar in the city. The gay bar.
There were other gay bars, but that one was the preeminent one, or what people thought of as maybe the best one. Which
teens getting alcohol.
Now, at that time, police raids occurred about once a month in gay bars, with men and women. The way it would work is men and women. The police would break in. Men and women would be lined up and their IDs checked. If a man was wearing women's clothes, or if a woman was found not wearing at least 3 pieces of feminine clothing, they were arrested. Because it was against the law to dress as a man if you were a woman, or vice versa. The bar owners would often hide liquor in nearby locations, so if their alcohol was seized, they could return to business quickly. Thanks to their payoffs, the owners almost always knew about the raids and were prepared for them. The raids tended to happen early in the evening to keep business from being overly disrupted. More recently, a historian discovered that the mob and the management of the club would blackmail wealthy clients of the bar, especially those that worked in the financial district. They made more from the blackmail than they did from the drinks, and were often paid in negotiable bonds by their financial district customers. It is believed that the police, who saw none of this money, decided to close the establishment permanently. 2 undercover policemen and 2 undercover police women had entered the bar to conduct visual surveillance, while the Public Morals Squad, which was an early version of Vice Cops, which they have absolutely zero rationalization for what they do. Vice Cops are idiots. Their only job is to mess up a party, okay? As long as no one's comfortably high or, able to pay a person to have sex with them, or that's their only thing. The public morals. Sorry, went off a little bit there.
That's okay. That's all right.
A little bit out of hand. Still PG-14.
Anyway, the public moral squad waited outside. Soon the undercover officers used a payphone to call the 6th precinct for backup, because this was in the days before, cell phones and...
Yeah, that's what we had to do. We had to take it. It was probably a dime back then, or nickel maybe. So at 1:20 a.m. on Saturday, June 28th, 1969, a group of 6 to 8 officers pounded on Stonewall's double door and announced, "Police, we're taking the place." Some inside ran for doors or the windows in the bathrooms, only to find them barred or blocked by the police. Standard procedure for a raid was to have patrons line up and present their identification for examination by the police, while a female officer gathered everyone up that was dressed like a female to give them a brief examination, and if they were found to be men, they were arrested. Wow. On this night, though, things did not go as planned. The people in dresses refused to go with the officers. People refused to present IDs. The police officers who frisked the lesbians a bit too intently, and according to witnesses, groped them inappropriately as well, caused the crowd to become vocally upset. Police seized the liquor, but the paddy wagon still had not arrived. The crowd was forced to wait for about 15 minutes as things got more and more tense. Wow, this is not going to be pretty. People who had shown the cops their IDs were sent outside, where they stayed, and as they stood and watched the proceedings, the crowd grew. Some of the more brazen in the crowd began to mock the police by posing or saluting them in an exaggerated fashion. Oh my goodness, I can almost see this playing out.
Me too.
The crowd applauded at this, encouraging these rebels even more. By the time the second paddy wagon arrived, the police were leading the members of the mob on hand into the first paddy wagon. The crowd cheered at this. Then the cops began to load in the management bar staff. Someone in the crowd yelled, "Gay power." Someone began singing, "We shall overcome." An officer shoved a man in drag, and he responded by hitting the officer over the head with his purse. You go, sister. People in the crowd began throwing pennies and bottles. Soon police brought out a lesbian, one many people believe to be Stormé de Lavière, maybe. It's a French pronunciation. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's Stormé de Larverie, but I could be wrong.
I apologize because I didn't take French in school. I didn't take any language in school, but definitely not French. A lesbian from New Orleans, born to a black mother and a white father, who later became known as the Rosa Parks of the gay community. She was handcuffed and fighting the police, and every time they got her in the paddy wagon, she fought her way out. She did this for 10 minutes before finally a police officer was able to get her off of her feet and toss her into the paddy wagon. At that point, she yelled to the crowd, "Why don't you do something?" And that's when the violence really broke out.
And Stormé de Larvery is someone, if I can find enough information about, she may be a future subject of our show as well, just because 10 minutes with your hands cuffed behind your back, fighting off 4 officers.
Yeah, that's wild. That is so impressive.
The crowd went berserk. The rumor began that the cops had raided the bar because they hadn't received their payment. Someone shouted, "Let's pay them off then!" And the crowd began to toss coins at the police officers. Some police had barricaded themselves into the stone wall, but it was on fire. Tactical police managed to rescue the trapped officers.
Wait. I you need to go back to that because I think it's very important to set the stage of the tone of this. These police officers literally chose to barricade themselves into a bar that they had just shortly before cleared out and raided that was on fire.
Rather than be
attacked by the bystanders who had watched them do all this.
You were on tactical police if you were lost.
Yeah, no, I'm not lost. I'm just making sure that nobody else has anything to say.
No, I'm sorry about that.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I'm not mad. I'm just saying I want to make sure that everybody gets their turn to say something. Anyways, tactical police managed to rescue the trapped officers and then formed a
Phalanx
to clear the streets. But it took them until 4 a.m. to do so. Wow. Nice. Really messed up good there. Over the next 2 days, gays in the village continued to protest and fight.
Yeah, you might want to put that back on and start over.
Wow. Oops.
Well, hi.
So the crowd went berserk, huh?
Yeah. The crowd went berserk. The rumor began that the cops had raided the bar because they hadn't received their payment. Someone shouted, "Let's pay them off then." And the crowd began to toss coins at the police officers. Some police had barricaded themselves into the stone wall, but it was on fire. Let's re-say this.
If
the place was on fire, and they chose to barricade themselves in there instead of getting coins tossed at them. I think the gays should be the police here.
That's pretty sad.
It's pretty sad. Tactical police managed to rescue the trapped officers and then formed a phalanx to clear the streets. But it took them until 4 a.m. to do so. Over the next 2 days, gays in the village... Gays, that rhymes. Gays in the village continued to protest and fight with the police if the opportunity arose. The riots were largely ignored by the news, and yet this event was the watershed that began to change the way the LGBTQ plus community was treated and perceived worldwide. worldwide. It was at this moment, things began to really change.
And now, let's take another moment from a word from our sponsors. I have no idea how long this episode is at this point, but just in case, let's pay for it, because for some reason our historical episodes tend to be a little longer.
Pivot.
Yes?
I feel sponsored.
Yay!
I also feel sponsored.
Yay! So, let's talk a little bit more about the riots. While the police attempted to clear the street, the rioters began to set things on fire. Prisoners were temporarily held at the women's detention center down the street. What was that?
What was what?
That little dance move you were doing.
I wasn't doing anything. That was Mom.
You said something about fire.
You said something about fire, and she learned.
I said, this girl is on fire.
Okay, it works.
You asked. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I said it works. Prisoners were temporarily held at the women's detention center down the street, and they began to set their own belongings on fire. And I want to stress, this wasn't just the prisoners. It was all the women in the women's detention center.
Good for them.
Began to set their own belongings on fire and toss them down to the street below, chanting gay rights repeatedly as they did it.
Wow.
Yes, ladies, work it.
Those present at the time felt vindicated and empowered, and continued to riot against the police. The second night, the police had tried to cut off access to Greenwich Village, and especially Christopher Street near the Stonewall. Drag queen and model for Andy Warhol, Marsha P. Johnson, joined the crowd like many others, and saw the Stonewall burned, but painted with slogans like drag power, we deserve rights, and of course, we are open. The police continued to attempt to keep people out of the area, but fights continued to break out as gay men and women, drag queens, and trans men and women continued to fight back. Marsha P. Johnson, who is a solid member of the Gay Liberation Front, as well as a co-founder of the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, different stars, began to organize the resistance and in some ways became the face of the riots, even though she was not there when they initially happened. People remember police chasing individuals down the street only to see in the same place later fleeing a larger angry mob. And in my head, somebody is playing that Benny Hill while that happens.
Right.
The homosexuals were joined by other activists, police provocateurs, and even tourists. Yeah, let's go to New York to fight the police. What the heck?
Yeah.
Many homosexuals felt a sense of homosexual affection from the public that they had never experienced before. The riots continued over the next several days, and the riot was covered by the Village Voice and a few smaller newspapers.
Wow.
Now people don't do that anymore. You want to know why? The internet. It's distracting.
Don't do what anymore?
Like riots like these. Like it still happens sometimes, but much less because now the internet's here. Now people have other things to be mad about, which I find pretty stupid as well because it's just the internet. But you know,
just the internet does a lot of things to influence the world.
Exactly. Probably why we should just do books instead. Like, yeah, sure, it's useful having the internet at the tip of your fingers, but also maybe not so smart.
I get what she's saying, but yeah. It forces a lot of people to confront things they don't want to confront.
Yeah, fair enough. So, Stonewall's legacy. In the wake of Stonewall, the first radical gay activist groups sprung up, such as the Gay Liberation Front, GLF, and the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, stars but at different stars than the Resident Evil game. 1 year later, Greenwich Village held the Christopher Street Liberation Day, which featured a march from the Greenwich Village to the Sheep Meadow in Central Park. This became the inspiration and template for gay pride parades in the United States and elsewhere. And in the wake of Stonewall, the gay community began to make strides towards equality. While obviously we still have a long way to go, the Stonewall Riots were the moment of we aren't going to take it anymore for the LGBTQ plus community.
I felt this was an important episode, especially with the way trans rights are being attacked and, oh, you can't have drag queens read children's stories. And the thing is like, there's a group of people in this country, and I won't say who are trying very hard to control the narrative and call them groomers. But the thing is, your kids are probably safer with drag queens than they are with straight people. Why? Because pedophilia is higher among straight people. Like, if I had the choice to leave my daughter with a Catholic priest or a man in drag, I'd go with the man in drag. Like, if I had to go one way or the other, man in drag gets it. So, I felt like this moment in history was something we needed to look at, maybe remind people of, maybe talk about how hard these people have fought. And like Marsha P. Johnson, who's another person we might eventually cover, she was eventually part of ACT UP, which was the anti-AIDS gay group that formed. She was found dead in a river. And the police were like, oh, well, it's obviously a suicide. And it's only pushback from the gay community that has forced them to step back and look and say, well, no, could be a homicide. Really could. And so when I look at the Stonewall, and the thing is, I didn't know anything about it. Right. The way I found out about Stonewall is I was over at the house of a couple of gay friends. And we were going to watch movies, and they were like, let's watch this. And they put it in, and the only thing I knew about it was the title, Stonewall. And I was just like, oh, great, a documentary about the Civil War. And as I got to watch the movie, I was like, is this made up? Is it real? So I had to go home and Google it. And by the way, it was a good movie. I enjoyed it. The only part that was hard for me is there's a romantic scene between two men, and it's not my thing. So it's kind of hard for me to watch that. Not just like I'm sure it'd be hard for a solid gay man to watch you and I make out, Hunt. So yeah, but it was all of maybe 3 minutes of the movie. I could go pee so I'm not mad about it. Just, I'm being honest. And then the other thing too is that this is not taught in school. I don't think there's a school out there that's teaching this. And maybe if they had, like my first exposure to a trans person, a friend of mine named Shirley had come over to play vampire and brought a friend that was a trans woman. And I kept calling her he. I'd apologize for it, but I kept calling her he. And that it was nothing I'd ever seen, been exposed to. And again, I feel on the plus side, I didn't feel like what a freak, but I didn't know the etiquette. I didn't know how to deal with the situation. And maybe if I'd been taught this,
you'd understand it a bit better.
You
know how to go by it without being rude or feeling like you're being rude.
Right. And I was being rude. I'll be the first back. I was absolutely being rude, but
it makes you wonder
how many other pivotal big stories like this there are out there that are a focus of a smaller community that maybe doesn't have representation now that will come out, 50 years from now. Because this, like you said, it's not something that I ever learned about in school. But, I mean, certainly this was a long time ago. Everyone should know about this.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think that it was a time when a marginalized community and the gay community was absolutely marginalized. Like, there's a sex researcher named Kinsey. In fact, they did a movie about him not too long back. But Kinsey was the first person to really do studies about human sexuality. And he published a paper, I want to say late 40s, 50s-ish, that basically suggested that about 10% of the male population either was gay or had been in a male-male relationship for over 3 years at some point in their life. And that number, he felt like, was about half that among females. And at that point, when you realize that this much of your population is I think that you're obliged to treat them as humans because that's what they are. This should never have come to this. And something else that happened that I didn't write down, but now these days, most gay bars are owned by gay men or lesbian women or trans men, trans women. But gay bars are owned by the community. And so while the watering down drinks may still happen, that's a time-honored practice in bars from back in the day. But they don't do it out of hatred for their own clientele.
They do it to make sure that they don't get too drunken. Once they get too drunken, they have to be cut off.
Or they do it to maximize their profits. But still, so that's another change, is that the gay community owns their clubs. To the point where I went to a club in Overland Park, Kansas, back when I was still doing the male stripper thing. And I want to say the club was called the Fox or something. Anyway, I was hired to be basically a pole dancer on this bus full of gay men for this guy's birthday.
Right.
And we get to this club, and there's a lot of Hispanic gay men in this club. And like 90% of them are wearing crosses. And I'm like, wow, you can't tell this culture has been radically affected by the Catholic Church. But it was like, it was so unique to see a culture in their own element. And then years later, I got to perform in St. Joseph at their very first Pride. And St. Joseph is such a small town, and it's dominated by these small town attitudes. So to see gay men and women be out in public and sort of just like, you could almost see them waiting for someone to yell at them.
Yeah, right.
And to have that not happen and see them just sort of shed this fear was a beautiful thing.
Right.
And I wish... And I just wish I could give that feeling to everybody who's ever been scared to be in public. That moment of, I don't have to worry. And so I guess if you're going to ask me what my summary is or what my final thoughts are, my summary is that we need to be teaching stuff like this. We need to know our history so these things don't happen again. But by the same token, we just need to be good humans and treat each other well.
Right.
No matter what.
Right. I'm a very shy and very introverted person. But when it comes to my beliefs, if somebody were to sit down and ask me, what are your beliefs? Do you want to talk about it for a little while? I would probably go on for hours. And I did most definitely could, because there are things that really tick me off about how people treat each other today. But nobody wants to listen to me for that long, probably. I
don't know. We have listeners who probably would.
But when it comes to the communities that I'm in, and even just seeing other communities be destroyed for no reasons besides that's cringy or it's not normal. Just because something's not normal, just because something's different, just because you don't feel the way that that person does about that thing, doesn't mean that you have to be a female dog about it. I can't say the other word.
Well, but that's just it. It's like I said, Krysta, there are people on this earth that
who just have to.
They have to have someone to put down. And the gay community was an easy target for a very long time because they didn't have any representation. None at all. And it's honestly people are just trying to go back. They're trying really hard, but at some point, these people who are the ones pushing the agenda against the people of color or the gay people or transgender, eventually those people will die out and will have more thoughts of... And I agree with you up to a point. The only problem I have is that these people that feel that way are teaching these thoughts to other younger people. Right. And that's how hate flourishes. And the only way you can combat hate is with love. And that's exactly what I'm saying. Our world is literally... I think people prefer life over being right. I think that's what I would prefer. I would prefer being alive, not being right about how a sexuality is bad or how somebody else wants to live is bad. But the people who are like that I mean, I don't want to characterize anybody, but in general, they tend to be unhappy people. It's so strange. So many of the people that complain about government handouts actually get government handouts. I don't understand it. I don't understand taking an entire group of people and just pushing them down. I remember back when we were first talking about gay marriage being legalized. And I had posted something about it on Facebook because at the time I cared far more about, putting my beliefs on Facebook. Now I don't, just because I don't want to argue. But so many people responded, but I remember one response very clearly is someone said, I'm not on either side. Both sides are wrong on this issue. And the thing that I remember thinking, and still think to this day, gay people just want to live like you and me. How are they wrong on this issue?
How are you going to be wrong on an issue if you are the one that is dealing with the issue and know the answers to said issue?
It's like years and years and years ago, John Wayne in a Playboy interview said something about like he didn't care for the way that blacks were organizing, and like his way of dealing with it was sometimes he'd have a part in a movie for a black person, but he wouldn't give it to them if they were uppity. And I'm just like, really? Why can't we all just be people, John? Oh, wait, his name was Marion. John Wayne's real name is Marion Morrison. That is true. Look it up.
That is true.
I don't have my phone on me, and even if I did, I trust you.
But yeah, so it just, I don't know. I don't get. No, I do get why some people have to be this way. I wish I could fix whatever is broken in them that makes them be this way.
Honestly, a lot of hate comes from hate or abuse or whatever that they've gone through before. And what they see is going to be a totally different view, and you can't change it necessarily. It just hurts to think that they might not know that they're hurting the gay people, but by doing this, by saying that, oh, it should be against the law to be gay, you are rejecting love for other people.
Well, it's like,
you are rejecting something that should not have to be taken. What if you couldn't have a religion? What if you were sent to jail for a religion? You can't change that. You can change what religion you believe in, but you don't want to. I mean, nobody wants to change how they are most of the time.
well, it's like there's a comedian named Matt Bronger that I quite like. And Matt talks about he doesn't understand why people don't like gay people. It's like if they move in your neighborhood, it becomes a nice neighborhood. Have you ever been to a gay neighborhood that isn't nice? No, you never have, because they don't exist. And he's kind of right. Go to Greenwich Village these days. That place is swanky, let me tell you. So, like I said, I guess if you're going to ask me my final thought or my summary on all this is that we as a people just need to learn to treat each other with love. And if you can't treat the people around you, even your neighbors, with love, then maybe you need to go move to some place where being a hateful cur is okay with everybody around you. Because it's certainly not okay on my block.
I agree. I like that. No hatefulness needed.
I will sort of try to, curve inward on this one, because I could just go on forever. But if you had to ask me, what's your summary, Chris? I'd probably say I get that some people have a hole in their heart, where they need to fill for some reason with being mean. It's not that hard to be nice. I think that we should respect each other. I think that we need to help the things that need to be helped and not try to mess up everything that we don't relate on. People may have different religions or different ways they feel, but in the end, we should all worry about what we can do to help the economy, or what we can do to help the earth on its own, what we can do to help humanity be a better place.
And I like that. And on that note, that's our show.
The show.
What to our listeners, what do you think? Do you have your own thoughts? Share them with us. You can do that on Facebook. Or join our Facebook group. Great place to share thoughts or suggest new shows for us. Thanks for listening, as always. Thanks also go out to Bill Barrett, who does our theme music. If you need music for a project, Bill's your guy. Bill Barrett, BEHRENDT at sbcglobal.net. That'll find him. Also, one half of the Rusty and Dusty podcast. Keep on podcasting, Bill. Also want to say thanks to Paige Elmore of Reverie True Crime. If you need a true crime podcast, that's probably a good one for you. But in addition to podcasting, Paige has a Canva addiction, and along with our Krysta, has done some logo art for us. Thank you, Paige.
Thank you, Paige.
Also, thanks to Aaron Gnurk of the Big Dumb Fun Show, who continues to promote us locally. Thank you, Aaron. Please join us next week as we look into the Moon-Eyed People.
The what?
Ooh, the Moon-Eyed People.
The Moon-Eyed People.
Wow.
Or maybe something else. Who knows?
Who knows?
Bye.
Bye.